All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into the story of a P-51 Mustang.
Oh, a Mustang, okay.
But it's not just any Mustang.
All right.
This one's called Toulouse Nut.
Toulouse Nut.
Yeah.
That.
And trust me, this name is only the beginning of the story.
Oh, there's got to be more to it than just the name.
Absolutely, and we've got some great sources to help us uncover it.
Lay it on me. What do we have?
We've got pilot pronunciation advisory notes.
Pronunciation notes. For a plane's name.
Yep, and a bunch of historical accounts too.
Well, those pronunciation notes are interesting.
Definitely.
Why would there even be official guidance on how to say the name of a plane?
Yeah, it's like someone knew this name was going to cause some head scratching.
It definitely adds a layer of mystery.
Totally. So let's get into it. Where did this name Toulouse Nut even come from?
Well, thanks to one of our awesome subscribers, Papa Kilo from Valdosta,
Shout out to Papa Kilo.
we know that the origin of the name is kind of murky.
Marky, how so?
Like, there's no definitive answer. It's a bit of a historical puzzle.
Really? So we're going full detective mode on this one.
Exactly. We've got to piece it together.
All right, I'm Genke. So let's break it down. Toulouse and Nut.
Okay, good place to start.
What did these words even mean in the context of World War II?
Let's start with Toulouse. It's a city in France,
Okay, I knew that.
and it actually played a pretty big role during the war.
Interesting, how so?
Well, it was a major hub for transportation and a center for the resistance.
So maybe the name's a nod to something that happened there.
A mission, a close call, a victory, who knows?
Or maybe our pilot just really liked the city.
It's possible maybe he had someone special waiting for him back there.
A little wartime romance.
You never know.
Okay, so we've got Toulouse, possibly a geographic clue, maybe even a romantic one.
Right.
But what about Nut? Doesn't really scream heroic war machine, does it?
You're not wrong there. But remember, these pilots were facing incredible stress and danger every day.
True.
Humor was how they coped.
Right, dark humor.
Exactly. So Nut could have easily been just a playful nickname.
Makes sense.
Or maybe it says something about the pilot himself, a bit of a daredevil,
Or risk taker.
Yeah, a nut in the best sense of the word.
So we've got a name that could be linked to a city in France, maybe even a love story, all mixed with some classic wartime slang.
That's what we have so far.
But where does this P-51 Mustang and its pilot fit into the bigger picture of World War II?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Toulouse Nut was part of the 375th Fighter Squadron,
Okay.
which belonged to the 361st Fighter Group.
And they were.
They were known as the Yellow Jackets.
Yellow Jackets. That name already sounds pretty formidable.
Oh, they were.
So what made them stand out?
These guys were the best of the best when it came to bomber escort missions.
Bomber escort missions. Those were pretty crucial, right?
Absolutely vital, but incredibly dangerous.
That's what high stakes.
Exactly. They were flying deep into enemy territory.
And
Yet,
protecting those bombers.
making sure they could hit their targets, and just as importantly, get everyone back home in one piece.
So even if Toulouse Nut might not be a famous name, it played a big part in a mission that was really shaping the war.
No doubt about it. Every plane and every pilot in that group was essential.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because without those bombers hitting their targets, the whole Allied strategy could have been thrown off.
Wow. Yeah, the stakes were huge.
Enormous.
So we've got this mysterious plane, part of an elite fighting force, but who was the pilot flying Toulouse Nut?
That would be First Lieutenant Charles H. Charlie Lyon.
Charlie Lyon, huh? And what was he like?
Let me tell you, this guy wasn't just any pilot. He was the definition of a yellow jacket.
Meaning?
Skilled, courageous, and a natural leader.
So we're talking more than just flying skills here.
Oh yeah, much more.
What made him stand out as a leader in such a high-pressure environment?
I mean, think about it. You're flying a fighter plane in the middle of a war. It's chaos all around you. There's enemy fire everywhere, and one wrong move could be your last.
Yeah, no pressure.
But Leon, he was known for staying calm and collected under that kind of pressure.
Wow, that takes some serious nerves.
It does, and not only did that keep him alive, it inspired confidence in his entire squadron.
So his calm wasn't just about him surviving, it was about making the whole squadron more effective.
Exactly.
And his leadership wasn't just talk. He made split-second decisions that could mean the difference between winning and losing.
There's this one account of a really intense dogfight with...
Hold on, before you get into that story, I think we need to take a step back.
Oh, okay.
We've got this awesome pilot flying this uniquely named plane, both part of a crucial fighter group during World War II.
Right.
But how does Charlie Lyon's personal story actually connect to the story of Toulouse Nut?
Well, that's where it gets really cool.
Yeah.
Lyon's story and Toulouse Nut's story, they almost become one, you know?
Like they're inseparable.
Yeah, it's like his skill and his courage are woven right into the plane. Every successful mission, every enemy fighter he took on every bomber he protected, it all adds to Toulouse Nut's story.
So Lyon's actions are what give the plane meaning. Like it's more than just a hunk of metal.
Exactly. Toulouse Nut becomes more than just its physical form. It becomes a symbol.
You know.
A symbol of Lyon's bravery, his dedication, his commitment to his fellow airmen.
It's like the plane itself represents all those qualities. A flying testament to what those pilots went through.
Yeah, and that's the thing about symbols, right?
What do you mean?
They can represent big ideas and emotions in a way we can understand and connect with.
So they help us grasp history on a deeper level.
Right?
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects, but you were going to tell me about Lyon in a dogfight.
Oh, yeah. So picture this. The bombers they were escorting come under attack by German fighters.
Oh boy.
It's chaos everywhere. There's fire and smoke, planes weaving all over the place. But Lyon, he stays calm.
Seriously?
Yeah, he starts directing his squadron, giving precise orders, leading a counterattack. They drive off the enemy and protect the bombers from getting hit.
I'm trying to imagine being in his shoes, all that pressure, the threat of being shot down. To stay that calm is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And you said before, he was known for making these split-second decisions that could win or lose the fight.
So what happened in this dogfight?
Well, Lyon realized that the German fighters were attacking from above.
Makes sense.
So instead of going head-to-head, he tells his squadron to do this thing called a high side pass.
What's that?
Basically, they fly underneath the enemy fighters, then use their speed and maneuverability to climb fast and attack from a better position.
So he used the enemy's own tactics against them.
Exactly. He outsmarted them.
That's brilliant. It shows how much strategy went into these missions.
It wasn't just about being tough, it was about being smart.
And Lyon was definitely both.
Oh, yeah. And his understanding of those tactics and his ability to make decisions under pressure were a big reason why the 375th was so successful.
Their success protecting the bombers must have had a ripple effect on a ton of missions and ultimately the entire war effort.
It did, for sure.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture of World War II, all those famous battles.
Right.
But hearing these smaller stories, like Lyon's tactical moves in that dogfight, it really brings it to life.
It makes you think about the individuals involved.
Exactly, and that's what's so cool about this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about planes and numbers, we're talking about the people, their choices, the risks they took, and what all that meant for the world.
It's a human story.
We've talked about Lyon's calm, his leadership, his tactical skills. Was there anything else about him that contributed to his success and Toulouse Nut's legacy?
Yeah, one thing that really comes through in the accounts of Lyon is his determination.
What do you mean?
He wasn't just satisfied with finishing a mission. He wanted to do everything he could to make sure his fellow pilots were safe and they achieved their goals. There's this story about a mission where...
Wait, hold on, before we go there. You mentioned that Toulouse Nut became a symbol of Lyon's bravery and dedication.
I did.
But how did a single plane, even with a cool name, become something so much bigger?
Well, imagine being in the middle of a war, surrounded by death and destruction. Those pilots needed something to hold on to, something to believe in.
Yeah, I can see that.
And for many of them, their planes became more than just machines.
What do you mean?
They were like an extension of themselves, you know, reflecting their personalities, their hopes, their fears.
I see.
And when you have a pilot like Lyon, whose courage is so obvious, those qualities kind of get mixed in with the plane itself.
So Toulouse Nut, with its unique name and connection to Lyon's story, becomes a symbol of something much larger, like the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity.
Exactly. It represents the courage, the camaraderie, the will to survive that all those pilots had to have.
It's amazing how one plane can hold so much meaning, how it can tell stories that still resonate today.
Right.
But let's face it, not every plane and pilot gets this kind of attention. A lot of them remain unknown, even though they did so much. So why focus on these individual stories? What can we learn from them?
That's a great question. And I think it goes back to why we do this deep dive in the first place.
Oh.
By exploring these individual stories, we can understand the human cost of war better. You know, we see beyond the big picture and connect with what those who fought and died actually went through.
You're saying that by focusing on the individual, we can better understand the whole.
Yeah, exactly. These individual stories, they remind us that history isn't just facts and dates. It's made up of countless human experiences. And when we understand those experiences, we learn about courage, sacrifice, and how powerful the human spirit can be.
All right, so we've talked about the mystery of the name, the 361st Fighter Group, Charlie Lyon's amazing story, and how Toulouse Nut became a symbol of something much bigger.
It's been quite a journey.
But what about the importance of those bomber escort missions? We talked about how dangerous they were, but what kind of impact did they really have on the war effort?
That's a really important point, and to really get it, we need to look at how these missions changed throughout the war. In the early days. Yeah, they thought bombers could handle things on their own, but it turned out that wasn't really the case.
So they were wrong.
Yeah, pretty much early missions lost a lot of bombers.
Why was that?
The Luftwaffe, that's Germany's Air Force, had figured out how to take down these big, slow formations.
Oof, yeah, that makes sense. They'd be easy target.
Right, they needed a new plan.
And that's where the 361st Fighter Group comes in. The Yellow Jackets.
Bingo. They had the P-51 Mustang, which was a whole different ballgame.
We talked about that before. What made the Mustang so special?
It had the range to escort bombers all the way into Germany and back, and the firepower to deal with enemy fighters.
No other Allied plane could do that.
Not quite like the Mustang.
So it was a real turning point.
Absolutely. It meant the Allies could finally hit those important targets they couldn't reach before.
So the Mustang and pilots like the Yellow Jackets shifted things in favor of the Allies.
Yep. Bomber escort missions became super important. They helped reduce bomber losses and made bombing campaigns way more effective.
And that obviously had a big impact on how the war played out.
Huge impact.
But even with the Mustang, those missions were still crazy dangerous, right?
Oh yeah, those pilots were flying right into the lion's den, facing enemy fighters and anti-aircraft fire all the time.
Must have taken some serious guts.
It did. Those pilots knew the risks, but they still went up there day after day to protect their buddies and help win the war.
We keep talking about Toulouse Nut as a symbol, but you said that a lot of planes and pilots didn't get that kind of recognition.
That's true.
Do you think focusing on one plane like this romanticizes war?
That's a good question. And it's important to be aware of that war is definitely not a romantic thing. It's brutal and horrible.
For sure.
But I think there's a difference between romanticizing war and acknowledging individual acts of courage and sacrifice.
So it's okay to tell these stories as long as we remember the bigger picture.
Yeah, we're not trying to sugarcoat anything, but by focusing on the individual, we can get a better understanding of the human side of war.
Like their choices and the things they went through.
Right. It helps us see war not just as battles and strategies, but as something that real people experienced.
And stories like Charlie Lyon's flying his P-51 Toulouse Nut, they show us that even in the worst situations, people can still find a way to be strong and find meaning.
Exactly. And those stories, those connections, they make history feel more real to us today.
It's like all those personalized planes with their names and artwork, they're all part of this giant story of history.
And when we look at those individual stories, we can start to see the bigger picture in a new way.
It really makes you think, why were those names and nose art so important to those pilots?
I know, right? It's fascinating.
What did it mean to them to have that little bit of personality in the middle of this huge conflict?
Maybe it was a way to hold on to who they were, to remind themselves they weren't just part of a machine.
Or maybe it was about feeling connected to the other pilots, knowing they weren't alone?
Could be both.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. The mystery of the name, the 361st Fighter Group, Charlie Lyon's incredible story, and how important those bomber escort missions were.
We've seen how Toulouse Nut connects to a much bigger story. A story of courage, sacrifice, and the legacy of those who fought for freedom in World War II.
And before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Think about what those names and artwork on those planes really meant. What were those pilots trying to say, and what can we learn from their stories?
It's a great question to think about. It helps us understand the human side of war, the resilience, the camaraderie, and the search for meaning, even in the face of something so terrible.
And if you're interested in learning more about this, I encourage you to check out the history of bomber escort missions, the stories of the people who flew them, and the legacy of those personalized aircraft from World War II.
It's a fascinating journey, a reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles, but about the individuals who lived through those times. And sometimes those stories have a bit of humor, a bit of mystery, and a name like Toulouse Nut that grabs our attention and takes us to unexpected places.